Hey, everybody, and welcome back to For the Booze.
For the Booze.
That's
We're back.
Right.
I am going to do my best to stay somewhat energetic through this. We went out the other day. I don't know if you can tell on camera, but I am very sunburnt.
Yes, he is.
I'm very crispy. I'm feeling a little under the weather, I guess. But this is a very, very interesting story. And this was a suggestion by my beautiful wife, Megan.
By me.
It was.
I found this one online, and I was like, man, this sounds like it would make a great episode.
It's a crazy story.
I'm excited. You asked for a crazy story, and I found you a crazy story.
You know, I feel like it's been a while since we've done anything too wild, you know?
Yeah.
It's been probably since maybe like Trans-Allegheny.
Yeah, that anything's been super, there's been a lot of uncomfortable things. And
I mean, we're dealing in death and
stuff like that.
Old hospitals. So I think uncomfortable kind of goes with it. But we also wanted to say welcome to all the new subscribers that are watching us on YouTube. You know, our last video did pretty okay.
It did.
So thank you.
And thank you guys, and we hope you want to stick around.
Hopefully you do. This is you know, this
tell your friends.
Tell your mom. Tell your mom's mom.
Tell everybody.
Tell everybody. I don't know. But today we're going to be visiting a place called Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. You ever been there?
Nope.
Oh, okay. I haven't either.
Been in Pittsburgh.
Oh, that's right. For some reason, I thought you were in Philadelphia.
Oh, idiot.
No.
I haven't been here either. Maybe close to here. I'm not really sure. But we are going to talk about a place I've never heard of. And when I read this stuff, I don't know how I'd never heard of this place.
I know.
And it's called the Byberry Mental Hospital. And if I say Burberry at any point, I am sorry.
He's been struggling.
I can't help it. It's called Byberry. To me, I just see Burberry. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. But this is we talk about like how bad hospitals are throughout time. Mm-hmm. This is one of those.
I'm excited.
I don't get too excited.
I mean, not, not for this. Whew. Yeah. Anyway.
They do some terrible things here.
Oh.
They do some terrible things here.
Again, you wanted a crazy story. I found
We got one. We got one. So if you want to hear, just stick around. Just stick around. Don't let your kids watch. Now, I want to start the story with a quote from a 1946 Life magazine expose of Philadelphia's Byberry Mental Hospital. 1,000 spend their days, often for weeks at a stretch, locked in devices euphemistically called restraints, thick leather handcuffs, great canvas camisoles, muffs, mitts, wristlets, locks and straps, and restraining sheets. Hundreds are confined in lodges, bare bedless rooms reeking with filth and feces. By day, lit only through half-inch holes in steel-plated windows. By night, merely black tombs in which the cries of the insane echo unheard from the peeling plaster of the walls.
That's a quote.
That's a quote.
That's a lot to take in.
And that was in 1946. When it seemed like I'm not going to say they cared less. It was
like a norm.
The standard was different.
Yeah, it was like a norm in the hospitals then for these things to happen.
And by 1946 standards, this was about as bad as it got.
Oh, God.
Bad. From the arrival of its first patients in 1911 to 1990, when the Commonwealth formally closed it down, the Philadelphia State Hospital, popularly known as Byberry, was the home for thousands of mental patients. Thousands.
It ran for way longer than most of these places we cover.
Yes. And it wasn't always called Byberry Asylum. For a long time, it was the Philadelphia Asylum.
Okay.
Or the Philadelphia State Hospital for the Mentally Insane, I believe it was called.
Okay.
Now, the Byberry Asylum in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, practically tortured its patients with no consequences for 80 years until it was shut down in 1990. Officially known as the Philadelphia State Hospital, Byberry Mental Health Hospital's main legacy is its horrific abuse.
In 1990, Philadelphia became the first city in America without access to a state mental hospital. A coalition of advocates, consumers, and families succeeded in shutting down Philadelphia State Hospital, better known as Byberry. Philadelphia State Hospital was infamous for an 80-year history of patient neglect, abuse, and murder.
My son had been in the hospital for 5 months, and they were about to transfer him to Philadelphia State Hospital. And my husband told my son's psychiatrist that he would rather see him dead than in a state hospital.
We've talked about some hospitals, but this may be up there with the worst one.
It's okay.
Now, it started like any other old asylum, a working farm model to provide patients with independence and a place to heal. Eventually, much like asylums of those days tended to do, the Byberry complex grew into a multi-building campus and became overcrowded.
One of the saddest aspects of the early years at Byberry is how people were admitted for reasons that would seem ridiculous today. Hysteria was a common diagnosis for women. Behaviors perceived as sexually promiscuous or morally questionable were sometimes grounds for admission. Some women were admitted based on the misunderstanding of menstruation-related symptoms. Individuals expressing political dissent or unconventional views could be perceived as mentally unstable during periods of societal tension. Women in particular were admitted for conditions related to domestic troubles, marital issues, or disagreements within the family. Postpartum mental health challenges were often misunderstood, and women experiencing postpartum depression or anxiety might have been admitted under the umbrella term melancholia. Symptoms associated with menopause, such as mood swings or hot flashes, were occasionally misconstrued as signs of mental illness.
That's because you used to be able to just drop your wife off.
Yeah, people just, for anything.
Anything, oh, yeah.
Literally anything.
If I was like, hey, cook me dinner, and you said no, mental hospital.
Yeah.
It was that bad.
Drop their children if they don't want to take care of them, like all kinds of things. And of course they have to expand and build because so many people get brought here.
Well,
so many.
yeah.
So many.
Yeah, because the requirements for becoming a patient here are, there really aren't any.
There isn't any. Exactly.
They're supposed to be, but there really aren't. It's basically just, I don't want to deal with them anymore.
Yep.
You take them. So it's
sad.
Troubling time. It grew so fast that it couldn't keep enough staff to properly manage the patients and facility. Soon, the administration of Byberry allowed people to work at the facility with no qualifications or training at all. Now, for example, if someone was seeking a job, regardless of their status, they were hired on at Byberry without question. Now, during this time, close to 3,000 people who chose not to fight in World War II for religious reasons were sent to work at mental health facilities around the country.
As Byberry struggled with its expanding population, the administration began employing individuals without requiring qualifications or training. Essentially, anyone seeking employment, regardless of their background, could find a job at Byberry. During World War II, nearly 3,000 conscientious objectors who refused to participate in the war on religious grounds were assigned to work at mental health facilities across the United States, including Byberry. The severe understaffing at Byberry led to a critically low nurse-to-patient ratio, resulting in significant neglect of basic care. Patients often remained unbathed and unclothed for extended periods, sometimes spanning weeks. The facility's cleanliness deteriorated drastically, with patient bedding left unwashed and the floors becoming sticky from urine. Faced with overwhelming challenges and inadequate resources, many staff members resorted to using restraints on patients, often for prolonged periods, as a means of management rather than providing proper care and attention. By 1970, Byberry had recorded at least 57 deaths.
Now, it was mostly due to their reports and photographs that the inhumane conditions at Byberry were finally brought into light. Due to understaffing, there was an incredibly low ratio of nurses and patients. You could have been a felon. It didn't matter.
Could have been anybody. I'd be like, yeah, sure, come in and take care of people.
Now, something I didn't go like super in depth in, there's a story sort of at the end that kind of touches on it. We're going to be talking more of like the medical practices of the time, but there was a lot of crimes against women and children that happened at this hospital. A lot. Like way too much. It just because
any is too much.
Well, because
but-
nobody said anything.
Yeah.
Nobody stopped it, and they had a knack for making it disappear. It was just something that they did, and they were well known to do it.
That's awful.
Now, because of this, most patients were left unbathed and naked for days or even weeks at a time. Housekeeping also fell behind, and patient bedding often went unwashed for long periods, and the floors of the facility were sticky with urine and other bodily fluids. Instead of tending to the patients in their care, many of the staff just resorted to placing patients in restraints, sometimes for months at a time, and I did find other accounts where possibly years at a time.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
That is so ridiculous.
That
is so ridiculous.
There was a
How is that
gentleman-
helping anybody?
There was a gentleman they believe was restrained for 3 years.
Oh my God.
Now, even as recently as the 1980s, a 27-year-old resident named William Kirsch was left in such restraints for more than 14 months straight, and possibly for as long as 3 years. This is the guy. After years of torture at the hands of staff, help would eventually come for William in the form of his lawyer, Stephen Gold, who stated that, quote, he was much better when he went in there 7 or 8 years ago. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Mr. Kirsch had it bad.
So he went in more than all right compared to what he is now.
Yeah.
Because of the treatment he received in here.
They basically tortured him into insanity. Now, Byberry was found to be infringing on William's rights, and his release was demanded. By 1970, there were at least 57 reports of deaths at the hospital. Sadly, but unfortunately not surprising, they were all attributed solely to patient neglect.
I bet.
Byberry's open-door policy also caused some issues in the community. What was meant to be a reward for high-functioning patients and good behavior ended up resulting in the deaths of a few of the hospital's residents. Homeowners in the area reported that sometimes they awoke to patients sleeping on their lawns. Other reported occurrences were that patients who wandered off from the hospital would sadly end up committing, no doubt caused from living at the hospital and enduring the mistreatments day in and day out.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Another sad story is that one patient even wandered off in the midst of winter, and when he was unable to locate any staff to help him, he died of exposure.
Then, in August '89, a Byberry patient who was discharged into a community program is found dead in the river. A week later, a second discharge patient is also found dead in the river. A third discharge patient attempts suicide in the river. 2 weeks later, a fourth is found dead in the water. The public is now wondering if patients would be safer staying in Byberry. But during the previous months, a Byberry patient committed suicide, and another froze to death on the grounds of the hospital. Byberry sits in limbo, neither open nor closed. The 200 remaining patients are neglected. The skeleton staff are so overworked that actual therapy has ceased to exist.
He froze to death. He just gave up looking and just froze to death, and nobody came looking for him.
So because he couldn't find his way back, he just ended up being out there. It wasn't even like a...
No, it wasn't. He was trying to find his way back, but nobody cared enough at the facility to look for him.
To go find him. Yeah, there was no roll calls, I'm sure.
I'm sure there was nothing like that.
You know, unless they're strapped down to their beds, do we even care kind of thing?
He just froze to death in the winter in Philadelphia.
Brutal.
That's cold. Now, death was certainly no stranger to the hospital. Many patients would go on to commit suicide, including a young lady named Anna Alter, 23, who died in 1930 but ended her life by jumping from a bridge linking the two hospital buildings.
Oh.
There was also Mary Matziuk that same year, only 13 years old, who would strangle herself with a nightgown that the attendant used to tie her to a chair with. Or Mary Pugh in 1932, who was 41. She died after being beaten on the head with an iron bar by another patient.
Oh, my.
There's John Price in 1936, a young man only 17 years old, who was bitten by a 14-year-old inmate and died from blood poisoning. The coroner blamed the death on lack of supervision.
I'm sure.
There's also the case of Stephen Sarzinski in 1936 who was 38 years old. He died of internal injuries suffered at Byberry. His sister would go on to claim that Stephen told her just before he died that he was beaten by attendants, but hospital authorities say a bed fell on him.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, it does happen.
Okay.
It does happen because there was the story, I believe it was at Trans-Allegheny, of the guy who the other patients put the bed on his head and jumped on it until basically it decapitated him.
I mean, I get that, but that also involved other people, like other...
Well, they're saying this had other people.
Other patients. You know what I mean? But...
I think that's what they're alluding to. It's not just a bed fell on me. They're probably alluding to the fact... Because there was a lot of patient-on-patient violence at this hospital.
I get it. Look at the way they were treated. I'd be mad too.
Now, in 1938, a patient by the name of Reynold Rosenblatt, who would mysteriously drown in a bathtub during a hydrotherapy session. A couple years later, in 1940, a 42-year-old patient, Alexander Albrighton, is fatally beaten after allegedly attacking the staff members. That same year, William J. Williamson, 59, was beaten to death by 2 attendants. Now, one was a dishonorably discharged sailor, and the other a former middleweight boxer known to patients as, quote, the Slugger of Byberry. And both were charged with involuntary manslaughter and convicted, but I also read served no time.
No way.
Yeah.
The horrors at Byberry escalated when 2 orderlies committed a gruesome murder in 1919. They confessed to strangling a patient so violently that his eyes were dislodged. Their defense was untreated PTSD from their service in World War I, a claim that shockingly led to no legal repercussions. They even received a pay raise following the incident. Violence was rampant within the hospital walls, with patient-on-patient murders occurring frequently. Byberry was not just a mental health facility, but also a holding ground for criminals sent for psychiatric testing instead of prison. The environment was rife with murders and assaults. In one harrowing case, a female patient was assaulted and murdered on the property, her body discovered only after staff noticed other patients carrying her teeth. The discovery of 2 more bodies in 1989, one missing for nearly 5 months, highlighted the facility's neglectful attitude. Patients who disappeared seemed to be quickly forgotten, reinforcing a disturbing, out-of-sight, out-of-mind mentality within Byberry.
Oh my God.
Now, these were just a few of the earlier stories of deaths at the hospital that would continue over the years, and I mean continue straight up until they closed. The list is quite overwhelming. From almost its opening day until the day it closed, people were dying in this facility, either from self-harm, other patients or staff. Death was always present inside these walls. Now, like many of the hospitals we've covered throughout history, Byberry had a special cure or treatment they would inflict on patients. Now, a newspaper article from the Philadelphia Record tells of Byberry's infamous water cure.
Oh, you mean like hydrotherapy and ice baths and...
This is kind of, you wish you would have had that.
Oh.
Now, an attendant soaked a large towel in water. After wringing it out, he clamped the towel around the patient's neck. The attendant pulled the ends together and began to twist. First, he tightened the noose. Then he gave the towel a slow turn to let the patient know what was in store for him. Now, the patient begged for mercy, but the twisting continued. The patient's eyes bulged, his tongue swelled, his breathing labored. At length, his body fell back on the bed. His face was a dreadful white, and he did not appear to be breathing. 15 minutes elapsed before he showed signs of returning to life, and the patient was subdued. So they waterboarded him, sort of, and noosed him at the same time, and strangled him out until they wouldn't move anymore. Water cure.
I have no words.
It's
I have no words.
terrible.
It's my job to have words. I have no words. This is crazy.
That's why I said because when I was reading all this for the first time, I also thought of like the hydrotherapy, which were like baths basically, and stuff happened in them, but this is worse.
Like they'd like hold people under and things like that. Like that's what I had.
Yeah.
In my
this
mind,
is worse.
Not this.
This is just straight abuse. There's
absolutely. This is like lead up to murder. Like this is how you would murder someone.
There was a lot of murders.
That's crazy.
Now, much of the abuse came during treatments at the facility. Doctors were pulling teeth and performing other surgeries and procedures without any kind of anesthesia or painkillers. Larry Reel, a psychiatrist who trained at the Byberry Hospital in the 1970s, reported that staff members would give patients stitches without any painkillers or numbing agent. Now, the doctor had been taught that people with schizophrenia didn't feel pain and therefore did not need medicine. Now, with the underuse of painkillers when they were actually needed came the contrast of overuse of painkillers as an experimental treatment. The pharmaceutical company called SmithKline & French opened a lab inside of Byberry and did extensive and morally questionable testing on the patients at the hospital. Unable to consent, patients were coerced into volunteering for these clinical trials, and hundreds would die as a result.
I'm sure. Just pumping pain meds into them?
This is like
for an experiment?
a dystopian nightmare of a hospital.
Oh my God.
Like, it just seems like there were no rules here. None whatsoever.
They just did whatever they want. Oh, and yeah, you're a pharmaceutical company with a new drug? Sure, come in and, test them out on our people.
Yeah,
No big deal.
That is exactly what they did to very, horrible ends for all these people.
It's awful. Oh my God.
Now, despite reports from Byberry circulating and sparking horror nationwide for decades, it remained in operation until almost 1990. As early as 1946, Life magazine published shocking photos taken by Charles Lord depicting atrocities and conditions within the hospital. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt was reportedly horrified by what she saw. Author Albert Deutsch wrote in a 1948 book after a tour of the facility, quote, "As I passed through some of Byberry's wards, I was reminded of the pictures of a Nazi concentration camp. I entered a building swarming with naked humans herded like cattle and treated with less concern, pervaded by a fetid odor so heavy, so nauseating, that the stench seemed to have almost a physical existence of its own." Now, in the 1980s, then anonymous accounts by patient Anna Jennings made their way to the state officials. Jennings had been abused as a child and was diagnosed with schizophrenia, but she still had the wherewithal to document instances of abuse she saw and smuggle them to her mother.
Good girl. Good girl.
But unfortunately, I didn't want to focus in on it, but I do want to mention it because I don't want to let it go. When she says abuse, it is what you think it is.
I'm sure.
It was physical and other.
Okay.
In a bad way. This poor girl. Luckily, Jennings' mother worked in the state mental health oversight, and soon a committee was investigating Byberry that uncovered torture and a culture of covering up the claims. Finally, on June 21st, 1990, after decades of controversy, the Byberry Mental Hospital closed its doors for good.
Thank God.
After the last residents left the huge campus, the physical plant of more than 50 buildings continued to decline. Byberry became a favorite visiting place for urban adventurers who wandered its structures and scavengers who stripped away copper and wiring. Eventually, a plan to reuse the site led to the demolition of almost all of its buildings in 2006.
Bye.
So Byberry isn't there anymore. Now, I looked, and it seems like some people alluded to maybe there was still stuff there.
Okay.
But I couldn't really lock it down if there was or not.
Gotcha.
I think that there is, but it is repurposed into a senior living facility.
Okay.
And it had a name. I didn't write it in here because it doesn't really. There's no stories about it being haunted or anything like that. It's just what was put there.
I mean, it turned into this building facilities. So I'm sure that, over the years of building and doing all that, you have some that are newer and could be reused. I don't know.
No, they're pretty demolished. They were pretty falling apart. I think they leveled it and they just put houses or put these facilities. I'm not sure. That's what I'm saying. I tried to look into this a little bit, but I couldn't really figure it out. But it was for a while. It seems almost right before Ghost Hunters was a thing, it became a popular paranormal spot.
Oh.
Which is strange.
I don't think I've ever seen this place.
No, I don't think anybody's been here.
In anywhere.
I don't think any of the stuff that a lot of people would know from today I don't think they've been
Okay.
here.
Okay.
Because I mean, it was demolished in 06, which Ghost Hunters was 05, 04?
Oh, I don't remember.
Something like that.
Don't ask me that.
It was somewhere around that area. So I mean, it would have been, they might have been the only people to have a chance to go there.
Wow, that's crazy.
But I mean,
That's a lot.
That's the history of this place. I mean, I read 8 people who died there. I found that on a website that probably had hundreds.
Oh, I'm sure if there's that many people there and everyone receives the same treatment that the people who did pass away received, I could only imagine.
Oh, that's what I'm saying on the website.
numbers.
No, I just pulled a few off the website. There's a website that is just, you can read tons of them.
Listed. Ugh.
They're listed. They have their people's names, how old they were, what year they died. There's a lot. There's a whole lot.
That's so sad.
You know, because normally we do these stories about, hospitals and stuff that say they have a lot of deaths there. But then when you go to look into it, you're like, it seems more urban legend than anything.
Right.
No, this one it's recorded.
Well, because we also come across too a lot that the record keeping back then was awful.
Trash.
Was so bad. And
Yeah,
it
it was
was kind of just a lot of it was word of mouth. It seems that this.
Well, I mean, it wasn't supposed to be. It was supposed to be record keeping. They just.
Absolutely.
It's hard to kill a bunch of people and then write in there, yes, we killed them.
Yep, sure. Oh, here's another one.
So even the people who did keep records oftentimes lied about how people died. Because what sounds better for the hospital, the patient hurt themselves or died of natural causes versus we beat them to death or tortured them to death.
Or a bed fell on them.
I mean, I think one of the biggest things that I read in all this was what made them believe that schizophrenic people don't feel. Like, that's nuts to me.
Oh, they don't feel pain.
That is crazy.
I know. What is that?
They're not crazy. That's crazy.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
they're human. They feel. And they were like doing They were doing like real surgeries on these people, though. It wasn't just stitches and like maybe a tooth here. Like, they were doing surgeries on people and not using anesthesia. Nothing. They were using nothing. Could you imagine having a tooth ripped out of your face without like some kind of Novocaine or something?
Nope. I've had a couple and
Let me get it.
absolutely no thank you.
So that is the history of Byberry. It is awful. You can read about it. There are a lot of articles, but you do have to remember they are older articles because this place was tore down. What's that? Almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's still very popular in the area where it was. Like, it's still very much alive in the community. So that's the history.
Crazy history.
I have some very cool stuff to read.
Oh
yeah. From what I've read, ask anyone who lives in Philadelphia or in the county of Bucks, what is Byberry Hospital? And you might just see them give a shiver. The name Byberry is a name that brings forth memories of a time not too long ago, where a hospital sat that housed the mentally insane. Now, we all know mental hospitals are not nice places to visit. This particular hospital could put the other haunted hospitals to shame. Talks of cruelty, abuse, and unlicensed practices happen to patients of this facility. The place even has stories of satanic worshipers.
Well, that sounds a lot like Taunton State. Yeah.
Now, Byberry never got the notoriety that Pennhurst did for whatever reason, although the atrocities that happened at the hospital could most certainly rival those at Pennhurst. The grounds that once held the old asylum are now a retirement village.
What do you like about living here at the Arbor? I love the people that live here. I love the activities. I love the clubhouse. I love the way of life living at the Arbors.
And I love the heated pool.
I like the sports, bocce, water volleyball. I'm in the book club.
I love the floor plan of our house, and I love not having to worry about snow or grass.
And I love the pool, that's a lot, and of course, free wine. You can't beat that, and a cupcake to boot.
Many Philadelphians and Bucks County people have stories of the old complex. The range of stories from a spirit boy that can be seen on the 3rd floor in a burnt-out room to satanic cult activity, such as dogs still hanging in the hallways and animal carcasses in rooms with satanic messages sprawled about. We don't hurt dogs on this on this podcast.
Absolutely not.
We are dog lovers.
Never, ever, ever.
That's right. Now, satanic rituals and other devil worship have also purportedly occurred on the grounds over the years. Now, there's no definitive evidence of a haunting, but with the trauma and anger associated with the building's history, it's especially unsurprising to say the least. Now, Byberry is rumored to be home to more than just explorers, people practicing the occult, and a decaying structure surrounded by fences. Urban explorers and visitors to what remains of the facility report an indescribable heaviness that is said to lay over the campus. Now, the land has surely been tainted by the abuse, and the spirits of patients who lost their lives here are believed to remain where they were brutally tortured. Apparitions of human figures are reported wandering in and out of the woods by investigators. Sometimes, blood-curdling screams echo from the rotting structure. Others report the constant feeling of being watched, floating white orbs, and the feeling of being followed as they make their way around the facility. And Byberry refuses to let visitors forget about the horrors that happened there.
Wow.
There's a lot of claims.
It is a lot of claims. Most places you get like a handful or so of those, maybe. But that's literally everything.
But the hardest thing about this is that, yeah, there's claims. And I'm not going to take it away from it because there's no way to know, but it was ripped down before like the modern day ghost hunting really became popular, which I'm sure a bunch of people would have went in there and faked a bunch of stuff, but we could have had some real investigators go in there and check it out.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not saying these things didn't happen. I'm just saying it's unfortunate that we are never going to be able to get, a closer look at it. Because this would have been a very interesting one to learn about.
Oh, yeah.
Now, a particular spooky feature of the property are the catacombs located underneath the buildings. One of the scariest haunting stories of Byberry involves visitors coming across the ghost of a former patient lurking in the hallways, ready to slice unsuspecting visitors.
Oh, my.
That is so ominous.
Oh, so it's just somebody running around there all the time with a knife, like trying to cut people? Like, what are we doing?
Turns out there's a lot of truth to that.
Oh.
I don't think I found it until after I wrote this.
Okay.
But there was supposedly an actual person who would walk down around in the catacombs with a knife just to freak out the explorers.
No way.
Yeah. And this was something that was known by people.
Wow. That's intense.
On the website, acrossthemargin.com, we found an article by author Caroline Kingyans about Byberry, and here is some of what that article says. Quote, "We called ourselves the Goonies of Northeast Philly, a gang of prepubescent, wannabe urban explorers on hand-me-down bikes, equally bored and curious, a dangerous combination for city kids. Our older siblings would go out into the world first, returning with scary stories to share, like the time Jimmy Russo's brother swore he heard an old lady call his name from the dark, cobwebbed corridors of the nearby abandoned Byberry Mental Hospital. He says, quote, "It was more of a cablet than a call. I couldn't wait till it was finally my turn to visit the ruins of Byberry. The bygone hospital was legend, and pursuing its time-worn corridors became a rite of passage in Parkwood. During soccer practice on the fields behind St. Anselm's, I'd stare up at one of its more prominent remains, one of many clustered buildings that were connected by underground tunnels, sitting way back from the soccer fields on a slight slope out of the distance, where I, too, felt equally observed. Reports of patient abuse were rampant well into the 1980s. On December 7th, 1987, it was decided by the state of Pennsylvania to close Philadelphia State Hospital's doors permanently. This would usher in the lengthy period of urban exploration from 1990 to 2006, so 16 years.
Wow. That's a lot of exploring time.
Could have been 40 years, you know?
I know.
Now, first to arrive were the looters to siphon all the copper piping and other valuable materials left behind. Thereafter, it was a free-for-all. Graffiti artists, thrill seekers, rumored devil worshippers, ghost hunters, cool kids, and not so cool kids. Each group had their own reason for wanting to explore the wreckage. One of the obsessed Byberians, John Webster, author of the Philadelphia State Hospital at Byberry, A History of Misery and Medicine, says in his interview with Northeast Times, quote, "When I first discovered the place, it seemed like a different plane of reality, like a dream or weird movie. The world slowly faded out of existence as I walked onto the property. Nothing made sense, just hallways and rooms. It was a place with no law, no church, no last call, and no admittance fee. Trespassers took full advantage of the ungoverned metropolis. The connecting hallways provide easy passage between all the buildings, and the police rarely attempted to pursue trespassers."
Yeah, I bet. I'm sure there were so many people that were in there. Like, so many. They're just like, we go in and arrest literally everyone.
Yeah, everybody was
like,
going.
Every night of the week, different groups of people and like all kinds of, I'd be like, yeah, no, I'm good.
It was just too many all the time.
I mean, I think it would be, what was this, the late 80s, it said, early 90s, and then all the way up till 2006. So I don't know. That's generations of people going there.
Now, in May 1985, at 11 years old, my opportunity to explore Byberry had finally arrived. My heart felt like it was skipping multiple beats the moment we flung down our bicycles' kickstands. I remember the smell of rot, the smell of mold, and asbestos too. Buildings, like people, have their own smell of death and decomposition. I got as far as the entrance to one of the creepiest Byberry buildings on Old Byberry Road, the one I used to stare at from the safe distance on the soccer fields behind St. Anselm's. I don't even know if that's how you say that. St. Anselm's? Sorry, Philadelphians. But up close, it was far bigger and scarier. Overwhelmed by fear, I decided to head home on my beloved and trusty bike, leaving my fellow Goonies to their brave exploration without me. By high school, real estate developers had turned the entire area into a typical business park with several trucking companies, nondescript businesses, and a few factories. Unrecognizable from my childhood. But even today, at 46, I can sometimes still smell it, sometimes still see it, even if it's in my dreams, unquote. A lot of people go here and talk about this smell of rot.
Even after everything is gone?
Yep.
That's wild.
Like it's something lingering. But that came up a lot reading from people who have been there.
Wow.
Now, this place was a local icon. Philadelphians of all ages knew this place and believed wholeheartedly that it was haunted. Many of the younger people would use this as a proving grounds of sorts. And while there aren't many personal stories on the internet, many people have said they believe it to be haunted by the patients who died there. But what do people who have told their stories have to say after visiting the allegedly haunted House of Horrors? Well, we took to the internet to find out.
Like we always do.
Now, on Reddit.com, a commenter named Homie5 wrote only 6 months ago, quote, "We used to break into this place and explore it in high school. I probably had a lot of footage laying around somewhere. It was super creepy with underground tunnels, and we found the morgue, and we had a few very creepy experiences. When it was abandoned, they still had paid security watching the place, which we had to run and hide from. Byberry is demolished now, but the state of Pennsylvania had a few of these abandoned mental hospitals that we would explore. One of them, Pennhurst, is now an official haunted attraction that you can pay to see," unquote.
Well, this one should have been too.
Pennhurst, it got a lot more news notoriety, so I think that's why it kind of...
Yeah, that makes sense.
It was just more famous, even though I know like the things that happen there. They're generally about the same, but it honestly sounds like Byberry was worse.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if that one was like in the spotlight like that one was, why wouldn't this one be?
It would have just been...
Especially why wouldn't this one
It would have just been the other way around, that's all. We would have got one, if not the other.
Yeah.
Now, someone named Brother Chaos commented on that Reddit post saying, quote, "Me too. Early 80s as stoner teens do. We looked for trouble. Climbed in through a basement window with the metal cage pulled off. Crept through the halls like a Scooby-Doo episode. We didn't bring a camera. Byberry is a solid part of my psychological damage. Things happen there. Find the worst possible place to take acid and see what happens. We were total Jonesers for action.
That sounds like an awful place.
I don't do
that.
I don't do stuff like that anymore. But even when I was younger and I did, that's not the kind of place I would do it.
Absolutely not.
It sounds horrible. It sounds like a terrible time.
Bad. Oh.
Now, the next comment has nothing to do with the paranormal, but I think it's important to the story and how things were when the hospital was in use. Now, on the same Reddit thread, another person named Screet wrote this, quote, "They did pick up a 24-year-old lady babbling in the streets and held her in there for 42 years because they thought she was nuts. It wasn't until after a staffer spoke to her in Ukrainian that they figured out she wasn't crazy. She just didn't speak English."
Stop it right now.
42 years.
Absolute garbage.
42 years.
That is I'm just going to say it. That's
42 years because you were Ukrainian.
Oh my God.
I feel like there's a big difference between like hearing somebody babble but hearing somebody speak another language.
In a different language than you speak. That's
42 years.
Oh, that just made me so mad. Oh my God.
Now, one last story. I found this on a website named atvriders.com back in March of 2005. And someone named Dennis goes on to say, I literally found this on a website that hasn't been active in almost 20 years.
Oh my God.
Quote, "I have been in Byberry 3 times. Me and my friends go there for fun. Now, I'm not a Satanist. The first time we went in, nothing special happened. It was basically a feeling out process. We, a group of 7, wanted to see where we could park, how long we could stay, and what we should expect. The second time was when we decided to let our balls out, so to speak. We parked by a corner store about a quarter mile from the entrance. We were there for about 4 hours and we covered a lot of ground. We were in one of the buildings north of Byberry Road and west of Roosevelt Boulevard, where the majority of them are. Now the place is destroyed, and you can tell that this is where a lot of people have been, and most of them had to be drunk. There's graffiti all over the place. All the windows inside and out are busted. The outside ones are boarded up. This was the trip that freaked me out. We were on the 3rd floor, and there was a room that was burnt to a crisp. It had a huge steel door blocking the entrance, but we wanted to see what was inside. Every inch of the room was burnt. I didn't see anything, but I definitely felt something when I opened the door to this room. It was just like this presence that didn't want us there. Now, me and a couple of my friends felt it. It was like pure hatred. Not that night, but the next. I had a really weird dream. I was laying in my bed, and in the dream, I woke up. There was a little boy standing in my room. He looked like a normal 9 or 10-year-old. Black pants, red t-shirt, and dirty blonde hair that looked messed up. I couldn't move or talk. He just looked at me and said,
"I don't come into your house. Don't come into mine."
All I could do was nod, and he turned around and walked away. Then I woke up in a cold sweat. This may sound like a lie, but it happened, and I haven't been able to explain it. Although it freaked me out, it didn't stop me from going back to Byberry.
Dude. Oh my God.
That's a good story.
Absolutely not.
And he swears by it. He swears this happened.
I have had incredibly vivid dreams that are similar to that. Not like some little boy being like, "Stay out of my house." But you know what I mean? Like, I could see this definitely being true.
I mean, it's a crazy story.
That is a crazy story.
Now, memories of the atrocities that occurred at the facility are retold by survivors of Byberry today. It's easy to forget that these abuses were occurring up until just about 30 years ago. Now demolished and gone forever, its legacy will forever be claiming the lives of so many people who came through its doors with hopes of a better life, and being a stain on the history of Philadelphia for the remainder of its days.
Aww.
And that's the story of Byberry Hospital.
Wow.
A lot of bad stuff.
Just wow.
Now, we didn't even get into any of this, but there's a lot of people alive today who either were patients there or knew patients there.
Or even
Worked
there.
Worked there, born there.
Wow.
I mean, because this was
1990.
1990.
Like that is, I mean, it is that long ago, but it's not that long ago.
It's like 30 years ago.
Yeah, but then I think of like the 70s and I'm like, oh, that was only like 30
You said
years
this in
ago.
another episode.
It's true.
It just means you're getting old.
I know.
You're so cute. You're so cute.
Thanks.
But yeah, so the people of the community still to this day, regardless if it's there or not, will swear up and down this place is haunted. A lot of people won't like talk about their personal experiences here, but it is highly believed that there was spirit activity going on at the hospital.
Honestly, I think that says a lot. I think that says a whole lot. Like everyone who lived in the area was just like, yup, that for sure is a thing.
But you heard me read this story, and tell me it doesn't sound like there might still be some buildings left.
It does.
But
it really does.
I can't figure it out if there are or not. I keep looking, and I keep getting articles that tell me about how it was, taken down and everything. I don't know.
I mean, we've seen people like go to where places used to be. Somebody please do that. Like just go here and see what's going on.
And I mean, look, if you're watching this on YouTube, or if you're not, if I can find old like news clips of this place, I will be putting them in here because I want to know, I want to know more. Because this place is nuts. This place is crazy. It's not, the people who were there were sick. The hospital was crazy. But that is the story of Byberry Mental Hospital.
Wow. You said you wanted a crazy one, and
I
for sure picked a crazy one.
It wasn't a good one, but it was a good one. But I have to ask you a question, Megan.
Okay.
Question is
it real?
With everything that we have just heard about the Byberry Mental Hospital and how atrocious the treatment was at this place, I guess the question is going to be a little different this week.
Okay.
It's going to be more of, did you think it could have been real when it was still around? Because it's not around anymore.
Right. And my answer to that is abso-freaking-lutely. Are you kidding me? The amount of torturous things that went on here and basically holding people hostage. Like just any mental facility that we have covered, or asylum, or whatever you want to call them. There's a lot of things that go on in these places. And we talk all the time about the energy that stuff leaves behind for people who die on the property. And I think this is a top tier candidate for that. And I couldn't see how someone wouldn't stick around in this place for the things that were done to them. So yes. What about you, babe?
Well, thanks for asking.
Yeah, no problem.
3 years in, you think you would just know. I am going to say, I mean, honestly, it could go either way for me.
Okay.
I think the biggest problem for me is that they tore it down.
I mean, I get that.
There's no way to know. There's no evidence to be found anymore. I mean, unless there are still some surviving structures. And if you do live in Philadelphia and in the area, and you know this place, go check it out and tell me. Like, let us know.
Okay.
I want to know.
But your question to me was when it was around. That's the answer.
But it's still the same outcome because there's still not a lot of evidence even from then. And people were going there all the time. People were investigating there. Might not be the same kind of investigating we do today, but people were investigating. I'm going to say no.
Okay.
I'm going to say no because it seems like the stories where I do find people saying, we had experiences. Where's the evidence? Where is something?
Okay.
Show me something. What I will say, the recipe is there for sure.
Absolutely.
I'm changing my mind. I'm going to say yes. The things that happened there are way too bad.
So bad.
If they're,
bad.
What? Yeah. I'm going back on what I myself said. I'm going against myself here. I'm going to say yes. I'm going to, yeah. You know what? Because these people were just straight up tortured. There was no healing to this hospital.
No.
This was a sadistic science experiment is all this place was. So, I hope they stuck around. Not because I hope them forever trapped in this plane, but just so they could haunt the people who did this to them.
Absolutely.
So you know what? Seal of approval. And that is the Byberry Mental Hospital.
Wow. I didn't think at me Googling and just ending up in some weird websites that a story like this would have came out of that.
But but I do want to go back and touch on some stuff. You remember, because even when you found it and you said it to me, you were like, oh, there was, supposed devil worshippers and stuff. There's never really been any evidence. It's just like a rumor.
I think a lot of that pops up at a lot of these places, and it's pretty common.
It is.
The Satan worshippers or the people who you're in the occult end up at these places. They're always there.
It
but
makes
I think
it
it's
spookier.
I think it's just like the people who live in this area find that place so creepy that they just assume that's what happens there. You know what I mean?
And I think it helps build up the lore and like the the spookiness. It gives it some kind of atmosphere. I think that's a lot that has to do with it too. But where can they find us?
Well, they can find us on Instagram at forthebooze_podcast and on Facebook at For the Booze.
You can also find us on X at For the Booze, right here on YouTube, For the Booze, and over on TikTok, where I'll be doing my best teenage girl dances. No, I won't, but you can find us there at For the Booze, and I will be back to normal very soon. I'm trying to be energetic, but it is very hard. I feel like the sun sucked the soul out of me yesterday.
Mm-hmm. We had a great trip, though.
Yeah, we were 10,000 feet up on a mountain, and I had no sunscreen and short sleeves, and I am fried.
Yeah, I'm a little crispy, too.
I just feel like a piece of bacon. I do.
You definitely got it worse.
Yeah, I mean, my face is red enough, but my arm is like beet red.
Well, it's because you had your arm hanging out the window all day.
I know. So I should be back to good old me by the time we do our reaction video, which I am looking forward to because I have something very different that we're going to watch this week. But I guess don't forget, if you have a suggestion like Megan did, or a personal experience that you've had in the world that you'd like everybody to know about, write those into us at forthebooze12@gmail.com. And if you'd like to join the Patreon, much like our beloved Joe Mattern.
That's right.
Teresa O'Donnell.
That's right.
And Tina Madat.
Yeah.
Please check us out on Patreon, where you will get an extra podcast every week called Behind the Booze. It's a lot of fun. It's very uncensored, especially compared to this.
It's more like just a hang out with friends and, read ghost stories kind of thing.
And you get to influence the show, and you get to know what's going on at all times and all that good stuff.
They've requested a lot of our most recent stuff, so.
Yeah, we always go to them first.
Yeah,
if they have a suggestion, we always take it. But I mean, a lot of listeners, if they're not suggesting and you do, we'll do it.
Yep. And those personal stories are our favorites. We have not had any in so long.
We haven't had any the whole time that we've been doing YouTube videos.
I know.
The whole time. It's been like a couple months.
I know. And we read them at the beginning of the show, and they used to be our absolute favorites when we got them.
Yeah, if you want to see what they're like, go back and listen to some earlier episodes.
That's right.
But is that it?
I think that's it.
Did I cover all the basics? No, I did not. 5 stars.
Rate and review.
That's right. Anywhere you get your podcasts, especially on iTunes, if you can. We need it to move forward.
Yes.
Now that's it. My beautiful wife now shall take us out of this adventure.
Well, thank you, everybody, so much for listening. And we will see you in the next one.
Bye.
Bye.
Stay out of the catacomb to get sliced up.